2022's Signalis by Rose Engine is overwhelming. Not in terms of difficulty or gameplay mechanics, those are better described as oppressing. Signalis is overwhelming thematically. Trying to find meaning in it is easy, and then difficult, and then there's meaning everywhere, and it just becomes overwhelming. It is everything and nothing all at once. It is horrifying, and it is beautiful. All that it is warrants a closer look at both Signalis and the act of analysis itself. When an author states that the curtain was blue, what does that actually mean? If my image archives from high school are to be believed, it means that the curtain was blue, and trying to analyze the blueness is foolishness, a waste of time, a lesson in poor writing. If the author meant something by it, then they should have said so more explicitly. Then I finally get to college and stumble through a literary theory class, and I start to understand how people get something more out of color. Literary theory, or literary criticism, is the act of interpreting and studying literature, attempting to reach a logical and reasonable understanding of not only what a text's author intends for it to mean, but also what different cultures and ideologies render it capable of meaning. The concept didn't fully stick for me until I tried examining Twilight through a lens of Mormon doctrines and practices, and even then, it's never been my strong suit. What did stick was the dynamic between surface and depth. Respectively, the outermost, obvious meaning of the work that nearly everyone who has read the text likely sees and agrees on, and a concept not fully explicitly in the text, something that requires recognition of what's implied, suggested, or hidden. Naturally, busted English major that I am, I found more joy in digging into video games than I did the literary canon. The criticisms of Ayn Rand's objectivism in BioShock, the pro-war framing of Call of Duty, the anti-savior complex reads in Spec Ops: The Line, the sense of cosmic insignificance and significance in Outer Wilds, even how we manifest and overcome fear itself via Pajama Sam. The depths of these stories in this medium was what brought me a sense of purpose. But what they tend not to teach is the value of the surface reading, or a reading from a blank lens of theory. Before we knew theory, before we knew criticism, we still found meaning in the stories that we took in. From written works to TV series to movies, there is meaning that we made in what we chose to enjoy, in or out of our education. It's what we glean from a simple read of the story, what the author puts out on the surface. Easy pickings, one might argue, but universal. And that brings us back to Signalis. What is it? What is it trying to be? What is it trying to say? Or is it trying to say anything at all? Imagine a theater production written by a playwright and performed by actors. No matter where you're sitting in the theater, you're watching the same production as everyone else at that moment. Same as a book, or a movie, or a game. You're experiencing the same narrative as everyone else who has chosen that piece. The same sentences, the same shots, the same mechanics. Now back to the theater. From one performance to another, think about how lighting can change a scene's mood, or where the spotlight lands can influence where an audience's attention is drawn. In a highly reductive sense, that's what literary analysis is, shining a spotlight on a certain part of the text, drawing our eye to a new facet we might have missed before. Think of literary theories as a program applied to the stage mechanics. It changes a scene's lighting, it spotlights other aspects, it amplifies volumes, or influences the pit orchestra's tone. When you change how the play is viewed, your view on the play changes. It's still the same play as it was before, the presentation is just different. Thomas Martin, a professor of English at Wheaton College, breaks down the big question of how we define literary theory, from lenses to tools to recipes. It all boils down to the following. In the matter of the interpretation of art, we take these perceptions or perspectives and we add them up to see what greater understanding they offer. Even two lenses on a single pair of spectacles provide this function in the most obvious of ways. Each vantage point is partial, knows its vision is partial, nor will and does not insist its one lens is true, as if that ended the story. Instead, each coordinates its lesser information with the lesser information of the other as it seeks areas of agreement. Insofar as their lesser information overlaps, they reconcile what they know with one another to attain more knowledge. Their divergence exists for the sake of convergence, their multiplicity for the sake of unity. With this, we recognize that all readings and interpretations exist independently of one another while simultaneously capable of complementing one another. As we come to terms with one perspective on a text, we can use it to inform another and another. All perspectives help us individually come to terms with, examine, and find meaning in various works. But most importantly, and what was lost on my early understanding, is that no one reading is more valid than another. Themes and interpretations all exist in a nebula around the text, all valid, all present. How can we examine Signalis like this? There is an ongoing war in Signalis' setting, and its leadership and propaganda has a choking stranglehold on what is permitted and not, with harsh sanctions in place for anyone who deviates from that. Anti-war and anti-fascist sentiment abound as players encounter survivors and records of the conflict's impact. Perhaps it's all in service to how far humanity has to go before we're ready for something like interstellar travel, no matter how advanced some of our technology has become. Maybe it seeks to reinforce the horrors of the cosmos and how woefully unprepared we are to step foot past our pale blue dot. Or the only workaround for AI implementation may be full-blown synergism with a human element. We can never create a true artificial intelligence. We can only jam human intelligence. Or the concept of memories and how they change with time, betray our own thoughts and emotions for that moment. Should we keep trying to create and refine artificial intelligence? Are we ready for what that entails? Because what it means for us and for them? How horrifying the technology we are life forms made that can't remember that our entire lives, our identity, the way around advancement is all just there already. Should we ever leave Earth? Some literature has a nebula of meaning and potential surrounding it. Signalis feels more like a meteor shower. As soon as you've gotten to one impact point, one perspective, another one has hit the ground, and another, until it becomes overwhelming. You have to run, you have to escape, you have to protect yourself. The potential is overwhelming. The perspectives, incalculable. Narratives can be overwhelming, whether through heavy subject matter, how a text is presented, think soundtracks, tensions, etc., or how it's experienced, especially in games, especially in the horror genre. But that sense of being overwhelmed passes like peaks and valleys as strong narratives are designed. Signalis is manageable on the mechanical side, if not nerve-wracking from time to time. Where it becomes overwhelming is how many different ways it can be considered. Through that sense of crushing potential, we retreat inward, defaulting to a singular agnostic perspective as some form of literary survival instinct. There's too much going on, so we need to shut down. And that's reasonable. Signalis is a lot of things all at once and one after the other, almost too quickly to keep up with. It's a cautionary tale of our own human relations, alit with anti-war sentiment, a cyberpunk-esque trepidation to technology, a biological look inward at our own humanity through body horror, a reminder of our insignificance amidst both nature and society via cosmic horror, a reminder of the significance we create in our own worlds. A story of independence, of connection, who we are against who we are forced to be. Wants versus needs, technology and humanity, and both its marriage and separation, reality and memories, life and death. It is too much. Death by 1,000 literary meteors. And so we recoil. What they don't teach you is finding meaning in the absence of lenses. These days, obsessed as we are with lore and icebergs, the difficulty can be in trying to take a piece at face value. No spotlight, no perspective, no agenda, just what the creator has presented. These surface-level interpretations are generally directly based on the creator's narrative as it is immediately presented. Or otherwise, what is evident, perceptible, apprehensible in texts. What is neither hidden nor hiding. A surface is what insists on being looked at, rather than what we must train ourselves to look through. A great many theorists, critics, and academics stand against surface readings, believing texts to be mere text through which we apply higher forms of thinking and analysis. Others argue the surface is an important layer. Surface as literal meaning is the literal reading of the text, removing all sense of subtext from a narrative, i.e., female friendships are female friendships, not coded lesbian dynamics. Others embrace the surface as an affective and ethical stance, choosing to examine them on their own independent merits, instead of through the perspective of other criticisms. The surface reading is valid in its own right. Not everyone has the time, the ability, or the desire to perform deep dives into various works, nor does that diminish those works' subjective meanings for the audience. But that still brings us back to Signalis. The surface is overwhelming, alight with 100 perspectives and 1,000 thoughts. When even the surface is so overwhelming that our reaction is to retreat inward, what does that mean for the piece, for our analysis? As I crawled with Elster through the Sierpinski 23 facility, I kept thinking of how I could possibly make sense of everything Signalis was presenting to me. And as I became overwhelmed, I started to gravitate to the one consistency in my confusion: feeling. Oftentimes, dread. Occasionally, relief. Sorrow. Melancholy. Regret. Vindication. And so on. I encountered terror and both ran from and fought against it. I discovered horrible fates at the hand of a man-made machine. I questioned who I was and what I was doing. I dove into horrible pits with only a prayer that I could crawl back out. I lamented a system designed to churn through young people like meat. I wished I could do more for the few allies I discovered. I tried to understand and, in doing so, simply felt. I used to think there was a right way and a wrong way to interpret texts. That did me no favors in academics. But now it helps me to think of it as a kaleidoscope. The device is the same, but how we hold it, the light we hold to it, how the stones are jumbled at the lens, those are all unique. The analysis changes for every viewer as often as they adjust their perspective. Likewise, to defend one perspective on a piece does not diminish another perspective. They can both exist independent of each other, just as they can complement each other and help one another become more than they were before. Valid, too, is the reading without interpretation, which is how I ultimately ended up looking at Signalis. Art makes us feel, but what it makes you feel, what it makes me feel, can be two wildly different feelings. But it makes us feel. And past any examinations, critiques, or analyses, that will be what helps a story live on the longest, the mark that it leaves on our souls. Sometimes a piece is simply capable of making us feel things, be it catharsis, elation, despair, fear, hope, or otherwise. But that may be the most powerful effect a piece can have. So, Signalis, what is it? It is a survival horror game about memories, humanity, and dreams. It is upsetting and unsettling in a very particular way, but never so difficult as to frustrate players into a corner. What is it trying to be? It is trying to be accessible to an audience of players used to trial, error, and sprinting. It is trying to be unnerving and overwhelming to the senses and the mind. What is it trying to say? Or is it trying to say anything at all? It's trying to say everything in a language that lacks the words, and nothing as that language overwhelms us in its attempt. There are no right or wrong ways to look at it. How much you can take of its thematic onslaught, how you choose to approach its problems, how you feel in a world designed against you, that's up to you. What it's saying, or how much you can decipher, is up to you. Sometimes the blue curtain does mean something more than its color, whether by creator's intent or user's perspective. Sometimes the curtain is just blue, a description and nothing more. Sometimes with a storm of 1,000 perspectives tearing across the sky just outside the windows, all we can fathom is that the curtain is blue. And sometimes we are simply struck with feeling when we behold the curtain. What does Signalis mean to you? How do you make sense of it? How does it make you feel? Whether a full-blown analysis, an in-depth critique, or just a recognition of the emotions it made you feel, your reading of Signalis and any work of art is your own and equally valid. No right answer, no wrong answer, just your answer.